This, being human, is a guest house. Every day a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. These are the opening lines of a beautiful poem called The Guest House by Jalaluddin Rumi, translated by Coleman Barks. And it's a wonderful poem and it's often used in mindfulness classes. And I'm glad it is because it's a fantastic way. It uses the metaphor, and we were talking about metaphors in our last episode. It uses a metaphor to be able to teach that we get the whole range of emotions coming in, and they're not necessarily a bad thing. We kind of classify emotions into good or bad, but we can think of ourselves as almost like a home or a guest house welcoming these different visitors. Maybe they got something to teach us. This is the Teach Mindfulness podcast. My name is Shamash Aladina, and we're talking about the use of poetry in mindfulness classes. Now, John Kabat-Zinn was one of the key founders of the mindfulness movement, I guess, in the West. He was quite a big fan of using poetry. He used quite a bit of poetry in his classes. And I also love using poetry. The Guest House is one that I use a lot. Another one is called Kindness by Naomi Shaib. I can't remember her final surname. I'll have to look it up for you, but it's called Kindness. And yeah, I could even quickly look it up while I'm speaking to you. Kindness by Naomi Shahib Nai. It's another beautiful poem, and it helps to teach about not just accepting, but actually bringing a sense of kindness when we are practicing mindfulness and interacting with each other. So, why do we use poetry in mindfulness classes? Well, just like metaphors, mindfulness is about pointing to that which is beyond thoughts and feelings and sensations, including them, making peace with them, but also stepping into that which is beyond them as well, the awareness or consciousness that resides behind them, and also explores, deeper ideas about our sense of who we are, and for some people, even our spiritual sense of self. So for these kinds of things, your normal everyday logical thinking, your what traditionally is called your left brain, cannot really access that. We're using the mind to go beyond the mind. So to be able to do that, poetry and art are wonderful. They're really, really powerful. So poetry is another way, an angle into that. Now, a few things to keep in mind when you're sharing poetry. And first of all, it can include language that makes it inaccessible to some people in your group. So if you do share a poem, make sure that your class get the sense of at least the meaning of the words. So don't pick poetry that's too complicated to understand in terms of the language. Think about the group that you're working with to make sure that they can get a sense of it. Another thing is a lovely practice to do is, rather than just reading the poem out to the group, get them into a mindful state. You could do some mindfulness practice or mindfulness meditation, and then you can practice mindful listening as the group. You can encourage mindful listening in the way that they listen to the poem. So getting the group to listen to the sounds in the room, and then listen to the sounds of your voice as it arises. And what I like to say is, don't try to analyze the poem too much. Just let them wash over you. That's what the invitation that I make in the group. So it's actually a great mindful listening exercise. Another tip is to read it twice. I quite like to do that. So I'd be guiding a meditation. I'd read a meditation. I'd read a poem. Give the group a few moments to reflect on that, let it drop, and then I find quite often that the group appreciates when it's read one more time, and it kind of sinks a bit deeper sometimes. And finally, you don't need to overanalyze it afterwards. You don't need to break it down. It's not like an English literature class where you break all the sentences down and try to work out the meaning. You could invite the group to share what it meant for them, and do less of the talking and analyzing yourself. And that's a good tip, I think, for all teachers, and especially for mindfulness teachers. Try and draw the wisdom in from the group as much as you can, and try and reduce the amount of telling that you do and more asking and drawing in. Finally, here's another idea, a bit unusual, which is to actually write your own poetry. Just like you could guide your own mindfulness meditations, you could write your own poetry. You could get your class to write their mindful poetry. One idea we've had in our Teach Mindfulness community is to get all of the different teachers to submit a poem, and we'll create a mindful book of poetry. So there's all sorts of things like that you can do and have a bit of fun with that. So, and that really gets the creative juices flowing, and I think it's a wonderful thing. So everyone's contributing towards the poetry. Anyway, here's some ideas and thoughts on mindfulness and poetry. If you've got any thoughts about this, I haven't really had a chance to discuss it with anyone. So if you want to engage in a conversation or you have any ideas or thoughts, send a message through and we can explore it a bit more. Thanks a lot for listening. Listen to the Teach Mindfulness podcast. Do remember to subscribe to this if you're enjoying it, and let me know. It's so nice to get some feedback, some reviews and things like that. So I know that there's people out there listening. Thanks a lot. See you at the next one.